Good morning, everyone. And please bear with us a moment. We'll just hang on in case a couple of other people join us this morning. Hopefully you're in the right place. You have joined us for the ARC England Digital Maturity in Learning Disability and Autism Services, a whistle-stop tour this morning of everything that we have found out from working with our members and external other organisations who've given us some great insights into their data systems and how they're delivering services. Nice to see everybody. Good morning. My name is Victoria Barr. I'm the External Policy Lead here at ARC England. I'm joined by my colleagues Liz and Claire, who will give a little wave. I'm sure if you haven't met them through any of our training qualification centres, DBS or Liz, with everything members and communication, you certainly should have contact with them. We're also joined by our wonderful panellists this morning. Our former director, Clive Parry, is back to join us today in his own independent world and come back to us as a specialist in learning disability and autism service reconfiguration design. We're delighted to have you back with us, Clive. Good morning.
Morning, it's great to be here again. It feels just like the old times.
Yeah. And we're also joined by Emma Nichols, who helped the ARC team deliver this piece of work on behalf of our partner organisation, who we'll come to in a moment. Emma, good morning to you.
Morning. Hi, everyone.
And then last but not least, I'm introducing Anthony Park from Actualise Living, who's going to talk to us more about the digital system created by ARC England's member Home from Home Care. Anthony, good morning to you.
Morning, Victoria. Morning, everybody. So a little bit about me, really. Many of you be familiar with Clive. So I was actually a user of Zone Standard and saw the magic that could be unravelled from within, if you like, across the whole of the health and social care sector. Many of you, in terms of your experience of using digital systems, you'll find that they can be quite niche and you try to force them into what your organization looks like. And when I joined Actualise Living, the first thing that I wanted to do was to make sure that we got rid of some of that niche product stuff so that people can use it and so the product shapes around the organization and not the other way around. Victoria introduced me as being a representative of Actualise Living. You'll hear some different terminology, so rather than you being confused, I'll just cover them off to begin with. So Actualise Living is, if you like, the top company. Actualise Living created Home from Home Care. And that story was very much a personal story. It's very much the motivation of what drives everything. And in essence, without going into too much detail, a need that they had as a family with their daughter created Home from Home Care, and that was because they couldn't find the care that they wanted for their daughter anywhere else. And then when they ran their own service and they ran their own organization, they very quickly realized what many of us that have been in the sector realized, which is we're pretty oversold in terms of what a product is apparently going to do and what our realization looks like on the front line. And we've all been in the scenarios where I think we've been oversold, overpromised and underdelivered. Where you buy a product and then there's loads of add-ons and there's, if you want something done, well, you get in a queue. If you want a development done, well, does everyone want that done? It's a pretty wretched story at best. So Zone Standard, in essence, was made by Actualise Living to support its Home from Home Care delivery. And then in the moving on of that product, they suddenly realized that actually it was relevant to other organizations. And like I already said, I was a customer that took on that. And I have to say, and I know clearly you're going to think that I'm biased, but I've never seen anything like it. Our testimonials will always say, we cannot believe how good this is. So what we're going to do a little bit today is talk you through a little bit around the product. We'll have a break in the middle and then we'll bring in some tech guys towards the latter part. We're also going to bring in a user, a manager from Home Care to be able to talk to you around some of the differences that Zone Standard makes over other systems. And clearly, we're not in the market to badmouth others. So we're not going to say this system does this and we do something very different, but you will get the gist of, as we go through, of why it's different. Now, it was only a few weeks ago, it's still fresh in many people's memories. Only a few weeks ago, um, that the Chancellor, I had to remember the Chancellor, stood up and everyone else had their head in their hands. And the big thing for the care sector is it's a real people dominated business. It's about people caring for people. The difference that makes compared to a lot of other industries is the percentage of staff costs that go into all of your delivery is much higher than most standard organizations. We like it that way, of course. We don't want to eradicate people from looking after people. But when the cost of people goes up, it impacts our sector more than most. So what we're going to look at today is a little bit around how our tech focus helps to rebalance those books. And certainly, can actually go more than rebalance those books and put some money back in on the bottom line even after the Chancellor's budget, but also how tech really drives innovation and ratings in a positive way. And one of my first ever CEOs said to me after I asked for some money, Anthony, innovation only really works when there's nothing left. So I'm telling you, there's nothing left, and you need to go and find a solution. And that always sticks with me because, to a degree, not having focus on money or not having a money ability to spend drives a lot of the innovation that happens. We're also going to cover a little bit around interoperability and how Zone Standard works as an interoperable system rather than a single login, but actually lots of different products that are stitched together. And we're also going to recognize that tech is moving at a very fast rate. And contrary to opinion, I spoke to somebody the other day who said, I'm just going to wait for this tech race to be over. And then I know that the product I get is going to last me for a while. What they hadn't factored in is the pace of tech is so great that if you're not in the journey to begin with, the step from where you are to what that looks like in the future becomes even greater. And you'll all be really familiar with some of the struggles, which we'll cover later, of getting frontline carers to use tech. Facebook's one thing, systems is a different thing. We're also going to cover a little bit. Sorry. We're also going to cover a little bit around how there's a wrong perception of AI in care. I mentioned a little while ago around how it's a very people orientated business. And in the back of people's minds, they have this vision and this view that AI is just about replacing people. In health and social care, there is a degree of some efficiency that can be realized that way. But the big bonus is around the efficiencies and the quality potential of what AI can do to support you in the delivery of your care, looking through notes and a number of other things. And part two will show us some of the big wins that are on their way. But if I can just have a look at the challenges, if you like, the real challenges around digitalization that exist in most of your organizations, maybe. I'm not saying they must exist or they do exist, but they might exist. I've already hinted a little bit around how tech on the front line is a really tough sell. And, lots of managers, tech leads, people will say, they go home and they message me on WhatsApp and Facebook about how they can't use a system. What sense does that make? In actual fact, part of it is just the fear of tech. It's the fear of, I don't like it, it looks different, if I mess it up. And that sits behind quite a lot of the fear. What happens if I get this wrong? And a lot of that is around the next part, which is around culture and leadership. You'll all have an experience. You'll all have an experience where your tech leads will say, right, so-and-so is not using this person's not using this team are not using this, etc., etc. And there becomes a real reluctance from a leadership team to go and kind of be quite strong around this is something you have to use. And I'm just going to bring in Clive at the moment, who can talk a little bit around his experience of what happens in terms of that kind of fear of if you impose digitalisation, you lose your staff at the front end.
Thanks, Anthony. I can certainly do that. I just want to check in with Victoria. I know you've got the findings from the research that you wanted to present. I'm just making sure I've got the right running order in my head. Is that something you want to do now?
I'm going to pop back. I don't mind. You're more than welcome to come in, and I'll pop back. I'm flexible.
Okay, lovely. Well, I'll just keep that fairly brief at this stage, and so that we can make sure we cover the research, because I think it's a really useful piece of research. But for those who don't know me, my name's Clive Parry. I used to be the England director for ARC, and I'm part of this call today because, on a personal level and on a professional level, I'm completely convinced that Zone Standard is a fantastic tool, and I say that because I've seen it. So I'm just going to briefly say where I came into this. So it was actually Victoria who mentioned to me this organisation called Home from Home Care, and this thing called a data-driven care model, and I didn't really understand what that was, and I went over to see it in Lincolnshire, and I was blown away by it. I was genuinely drove home thinking, I think I've seen the future of tech systems in care. I've been over twice since to see it, and I've had that same feeling every time. So there's something really special here in terms of the way the technology works. To pick up on Anthony's point, my own experience includes working in a large learning disability and autism services provider, where a big system, and I guess I can name those systems because I don't have any particular skin in the game, so I can say this. It was an access system that was implemented. I think it was a brilliant system. My feeling about it is it probably did way more than most of the people who were being asked to use it needed from it. As a consequence, it was too complex for them, and they just didn't use it. So when I joined, one of the first things the exec team said to me is, can you get your people in this region to use this tool? Because we implemented it 12 months ago and no one's using it. And we tried and they wouldn't use it. And you end up in this quite difficult situation where you've got a massive investment in a system and people won't use it. Some of it, to be fair, was around the implementation. And I'm not bad-mouthing Access. I think it is an incredible tool. But because it does too much, and I think the expression I'd use is it kind of overfaces people, so they're looking at the system and they don't know where to start, and they can't see how this is relevant to them. And that was across a range of roles. So it was support workers, it was team leaders, it was regional managers, it was registered managers. So yeah, I mean, I have my own experience of that, and it's actually quite hard to turn it around. It's quite hard to get people to engage in that system and view it positively once they've set their minds against it. So I certainly have that experience in my life before I was the ARC England director. I also, at some point later on, will talk to you about why I think this Zone Standard system is amazing and what I think it can do for other organisations. But I'll pause there in case you wanted to do your research now, Victoria.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Anthony, as well. I think what this has been fascinating for us to look at, and I'll ask Liz to pop up some slides, is to really understand where our members are and wider organisations. And I suppose we're sort of jumping to the chase a little bit, which is to say we heard all the pressure points that people shared with us. And as we undertook a piece of research to really help inform policy thinking with colleagues, both at NHS England and the Department of Health and Social Care, I think people know that the ARC England Research Unit's been positively interested in looking at data, and digital in particular has been a fascinating part of the jigsaw for us that we've been undertaking lots of different pieces of work on, and we'll certainly come back and talk about what we're doing in 2026 for members to access. But through the summer of 2025, Liz, next slide, please. We ran a 3-part webinar series, which you've hopefully come back to get some more information from us today. Next slide, please. And think about where we're being able to show the live chat, the discussion, the case studies, and the research evaluation that really helped us understand what members need, what's important for people. And so we ran, as I say, a couple of sessions that were specifically focused on workforce and HR systems and their digital adoptions. And then the second was much more focused on the care planning environment and operational management systems. And then we had an interactive session where we talked with one of our other members, who people may recall was from Steps Ahead Care, and they have a combination of individuals that have had brain injuries as well as individuals with learning disabilities as well in their services, and how the system they'd left behind and then implemented with the support of Zone Standard had worked in their own organisation. What we found across the piece was we talked to about 80 individual frontline staff, HR managers, chief execs and IT specialists within care services. We ran those 3 webinars as we discussed, and we also ran an interactive polling sessions on the day and surveys that went out for people to fill in directly. We found an awful lot of information out. So the key challenges we've talked about already, and Anthony and Clive have highlighted those: interoperability. So how do you get one system to talk to another system? Why have we got Sage as a finance system and a different payroll system and then a different rostering system? And we can't get information out of our old system because there's a penalty clause in our contract, which is going to cause us a problem. And that we also saw lots of really great things going on. So recommendations for improvement. So some members have created bespoke systems. Some people have really got some great things working in an isolated way, but need to get that consistently working across different services within their organisation. Next slide, please. So what we found was that across all of those 80 individuals we talked to, 73%, so about 2/3, were what we'd call partly digital. So that meant that they had certain systems, but not what we started to refer to in the recruitment cycle, from the point of recruitment all the way through to the point of retirement, for example. So they might have an HR system, but the HR system may not be connected with the payroll system. So there were some tools and resources that were being used by members, but not a fully integrated suite. But we did have just over 25% of individuals that had some end-to-end system processing within their organisation. That meant that probably the HR system, the finance system and the care management system might be working together, although there were cracks, but there were also some really good examples of success. Next slide, please, Liz. We had a really interesting mix of service provision. So we saw everything from mental health services. There was a hospital trust during one of our calls as well and talked about their learning disability ATU. Supported living was the predominantly highest service model. So it really reflected what people needed in those types of services. Residential, and 11% were day services as well. So a good spread of different models of learning disability and autism care provision. Next slide, please, Liz. We talked about some of the challenges. Staff resistance, almost you could see what we've been talking about to you this morning in our preamble. Training and implementation were fascinating. So we saw lots of concerns around continuous training. So, for example, organisations might have support from their software supplier for a certain period of time, normally in the pre-implementation and then slightly into the post-implementation phase. So it might be a block of support, training modules that are available online, or training content delivered in various formats, some face-to-face and some online, for example, but really short and time limited. We've had quite a number of different discussions around data and data privacy. How do you share the individual supported data, particularly around care management, for example, with other family members or other allied professionals that are outside services? So we talked about security and data. Infrastructure limitations, all sorts of things popped up here, such as Wi-Fi connectivity. Do individuals have mobile phones? What was the device policy? What was the data sharing GDPR processes? So lots of things that popped up into here. Funding was also a key consideration, but not as high up in the order of the problems or the top concerns and pressure points that were facing members. Another really interesting piece was about having business analytic capability or change management. So were there specialist people within the organisation that would understand how to overcome the challenges and how to bring a new system in, or how to get the most out of the system that was had, for example, in that organisation. So in Clive's example, only probably 30% of the functionality and capability of the system was actually being used. So how do you get the best out of the system you purchase? Next slide, please, Liz. The impact of digital systems was great, and we looked at this both from the frontline staff perspective and from the more senior managers. So we got, as you can see, frontline staff feeling semi-confident, middle of the road, 3.3 in terms of how they ranked, 0 being the lowest response to using the technology, to 5 feeling super confident and able. You can see 54% were right down the middle. There was kind of ambivalence rather than enthusiasm for digital systems, and a 50-50 split between positive and neutral impact. A lot of the conversation did come up to talking about those limitations we've touched on about the service user accessibility in the family portal. I'm sure Emma's got some thoughts and can probably come into picking that up a bit later when we come back. And then privacy concerns. So we've picked up different elements as well about using Alexas within systems, and then hearing about medication management happening within a supported living service, concerns about staff and their confidentiality of individuals having iPads, for example, and connected to Skype or Zoom or other platforms, gaming, lots of different discussions we've had across the period of time with people about accessibility and confidentiality. Next slide, please. So we saw that there were some really great opportunities here, and that's hopefully what we can reflect and we might pick up from colleagues in the discussion next. We want software providers and service providers to really think about the training for care and support staff and the different environments that operate within learning disability and autism services. We need to get better at supporting members to understand the changes proactively and working with those service providers, and to think way in advance about what integration will mean for people as they go on a journey of new software solutions to their organisational structure. It's not just about buying a product off the shelf and then implementing it directly into your current service. You're probably going to have to think about how to reconfigure things, what best in class may look like, that culture piece that we've started to touch on earlier. And we also want to make sure that interoperability is key. How does system 1 talk to system 2? So even if you have older systems and you're not thinking about investing in anything new, how could we get your current service providers to work more effectively with you and provide continuous training or better interoperability? From an ARC England perspective, and one of the things we want to do next year is to bring more of this knowledge around learning disability and autism services and the digital transformation that could be gathered in pace with neighbourhood health systems, the 10-year plan within the NHS, better support through primary care to individuals with mental health and learning disability and autism needs. So we really want to ensure that policymakers are thinking about investing. 2 or 3 years ago, people will see that there was some ICB money that was available, so NHS money that was for services. But if you were in certain parts of the country, you could only access that software money, for example, for older adults and for trips and falls. We want digital money to be available for every service model and certainly for people earlier in their care journey, so that we can get really good systems working within learning disability and autism services. Next slide, please. We're going to hand back to Anthony and to Clive, and we're going to talk a bit more about the workforce benefits. I'm going to let Liz take the slides down and for you to come back in. More than happy to take questions. So if there's a reflection point, just to ask people, how does that feel? Do those feel like some of the challenges within your own organisation? Do please pop a hand up and have a chat with us if you'd like to. If we've bamboozled you into silence and you just want to write something in the chat, that's fine. I can see Ben is writing me a note. You're more than happy to come in, Ben, if you want to come off mic. Let Ben in, Liz. Can you hear us, Ben? Maybe not.
I've been given my mic back. That's lovely.
Ah, there you go.
No, I was actually just replying to Clive's comment in the chat about the negative impacts of implementation changes. But I think this is really important research, Victoria. You know how close this is to my heart, and I think the points you made about the perception as well as the reality of the person's own access to records and of family and friends' access to records is one of those critical things that needs to be tackled carefully, sensitively, and inclusively, right from way before any sort of implementation takes place. But I want to shut up and listen, so I'll leave it at that for now.
No, incredibly powerful, because the person supported is incredibly important in this story, as well as the provider themselves. And I can see Matt's typing. I've hopefully unlocked people's mics. If there was a problem there, do pop your hands up and chat to us. But I'm going to pass back to Anthony to carry us on.
Thank you. And was that Ben that was just talking? Did I hear correctly?
It was, yeah.
Yeah. So Ben raised a couple of really important points there around kind of how you really consider and program for that change management. And one of the things that we see an awful lot is around how people are sold systems on how it benefits the top 1% of the organization that wants all the stats, without thinking about what generates those stats and how important it is that the whole organization becomes part of the considerations for system change and the realities of what that means on the front line. And you'll hear later, Ben, around how, because this has been designed very much around initially home from home care and then pushed out from there. It's been designed from the front line. It's been designed by middle managers. It's been designed by those that want data to drive strategy change. Everyone across the organization has kind of focused around what they need and put this within the system. And I know Clive a little bit later is going to talk about how we open closed cultures with tech. And that was a little bit around some of what you were then talking about then. But in terms of change, even when we know there's a need to change, we always find a reason not to in a lot of circumstances. And it's never the right moment. You might have a legacy system. It took you absolutely ages to get people using it, and now they're using it. The concept of potentially moving away from that is quite a difficult concept to balance when there's so much going on. And in the day job, if you like, the firefighting of who's covering this shift, how many vacancies are we carrying at the moment, all of those things. And often the release valve for those daily challenges are agency staff. And I'm going to focus a little bit on agency staff because most people see them as it's not the greatest phrase in the world, but a necessary evil. The evil not coming from the person, but by more or less the 35% additional cost that they come with, because it's not just what you pay the agency over what you would pay the staff, but there's the time consumption of speaking with that agency, allocating cover and everything that goes with it. And the reason why I'm going to challenge the fact that it's a necessary evil in that respect is that Home from Home Care 10 years ago stopped using agencies, and they've never used agencies since. And they also, as a model, go against the concept that people say, oh, well, yeah, but if you're rurally isolated, there's a number of recruitment challenges that come with that. Home from Home Care are rurally isolated with homes across all the green fields of Lincolnshire. So what I'm going to talk about a little bit is how have they made that happen? What have we learnt from that, and how we absorb that within Zone Standard as a system? Because often having the right staff in your organization that turn up, that you don't carry vacancies, is often the key to lifting the head up and looking at the strategic horizon rather than firefighting on a daily level. In terms of how Home from Home Care transition, what they recognized was that it was really important to understand that money is important. We all know money's important. Money's important to the organization, sustainability, but it's also important to the individual. And I think I read somewhere the other day that now most workers on the fulfilling grassroots roles can stand about 3 weeks without a job before they're in severe financial difficulties. That is pushing people to look for higher wage jobs. But it's not just about higher wage. The answer is not just to pay everyone loads more money. Because ultimately, if you're bringing them into an organization where you haven't got the other things right, you lose them as well. You just end up becoming someone else's trainer for another organization to take the benefit from. The real thing, and this is some of the features within Zone Standard, is actually to understand their motives. It's not just about hourly pay. It's about a number of different things that tick their boxes. Pay may well be at the top. But actually, how can you then use some of those motivations to incentivize your staff? How can you use some of those to train them better or recruit in a different way? I'm going to just move across to Clive very quickly because I know Clive is quite powerful, far more powerful than I am, around how to talk about the motives that drive staff forward in your organisation.
Thanks, Anthony. I'll try and keep this brief. Excuse me. So the chap who always comes to mind when I think about motivation is a guy called Hertzberg, I think his name was, and he wrote about motivation theory. And some of the stuff that he wrote about is definitely a guy that's worth looking up, because the stuff that he wrote about is sometimes a little bit counterintuitive. And the thing he taught us that the things that really make a difference to people being motivated at work are not necessarily the obvious things that we think about. He talked about things like hygiene factors, so the environment that people are working in, but the critical things that he talked about that really do have a positive impact on staff motivation, and that is across all roles, is autonomy. So people need to feel that they have a sense of a degree of autonomy. And I think that's quite an important point, because sometimes systems tell us, actually, you're working for me, not the other way around. So sometimes the feeling you can have engaging with a system is that you are increasingly feeling that you're feeding this thing, and you're not necessarily sure why. Whereas actually the system should give you the feeling that it's working for you. So that speaks to the point about autonomy, but also that's that feeling of making a difference. And I think from the point of view of systems where people are entering data in perhaps multiple times into different systems, perhaps because different systems require the same data in slightly different formats or in a slightly different structure. That's not what people came into care and support services to do. They came into these services because they're motivated to work positively with people who need that support from them. So it's demotivating for people, and I can speak from personal experience, to be required to use systems that feel as though you're just entering data into a system. It doesn't feel actually that relevant to what you're doing, and it feels as though you're doing more reporting on what you're doing than doing the thing you're supposed to be doing. I think that's a problem, in lots of sectors. I know that the police have talked extensively about that, and I think it's a big issue in the NHS, but it's a big issue in care and social care services as well, because we've got really, really powerful systems, and I think sometimes we fall into letting the tail wag the dog a little bit with those systems, and we become sort of responsible to the system, also responsible to the people who are reading the data from the system. So I guess a system that is intuitive, to pick up on Matt's point in the chat, that has an intuitive interface, and for me that's about systems that don't present you with more data, information, screens, complexity than you actually need right now for the task you're doing right now. I don't necessarily need to see the whole picture at this moment in time, and I'll give a good example of that in a second. And are easy to use and intuitive, and it feels natural to use. And Anthony's mentioned things like Facebook. They're really clever systems in many ways. I'm not a personal view, I think Mark Zuckerberg might be the Antichrist, but putting that to one side, that you cannot say other than that Facebook and those kinds of social media systems have been developed really cleverly, and people are using them naturally. Whether that's a positive thing or not, we can debate, but the fact is that people do find it easy to use those systems, and so an interface that works in that way is certainly possible. I just want to give a quick example from one of my visits to Home from Home Care. So the thing about the system for me included this building called the Social Care Exchange, which is a fantastic place to see. What's going on there is amazing. It's where people are monitoring what's happening across Home from Home Care, and they're monitoring it in the minutest detail, and reacting when they need to, and not reacting when they don't need to. But the thing that really struck me was actually in the service. There was a chap being supported in the service. Home from Home Care support people with complex and high support needs, people who would otherwise be in an ATU or a hospital setting if they weren't being supported to live in their own home. And I was watching a support worker working with a man who to be honest, I hadn't noticed because I didn't know him, but the support worker noticed that his mood had changed, and that he wasn't as happy. And it might be because I was there, I don't know. So he just encouraged me to move a step back, and he himself stepped back from the person he was supporting, and then just quickly in his phone, just from a drop down menu, entered, I stepped back to give him a little bit more space, which seemed to help, and then he put his phone back in his pocket. And that was him interacting with the system. And that data at that level is being captured by this system. There are millions and millions and millions of pieces of data being captured from that level of the way the thing works. The most important thing was the support worker supported the person and supported me to make sure that that individual didn't become distressed unnecessarily. We were in his home at the end of the day, and that was his primary concern. But the way the system allowed him to do that was really, really impressive. And then when you go back to the data center and you see what can be done with that data when it's all aggregated, it's, again, just very quickly, an example again from Home Care. I wasn't part of this conversation, but I understand an inspector came along and said, look, I can see the occasions when this person's become distressed have dropped off significantly. It's really, really good that this has happened. That will mean we can reduce the care package for sure, doesn't it? And the staff at Home from Home Care said, hang on a second, let us show you why it is that person is not getting as distressed as frequently as they were. And it was interventions like that most systems don't record, that showed I think it wasn't an inspector, it was somebody from the council. Actually, if you reduce the care and support package, you're reducing those interventions which are documented. If you do that, then we can tell you that that person's experience of distress will go back up again. And that was convincing to the council. So I'll stop there because I could talk forever about this system. It's an incredible thing, and I do encourage anybody to go and see it if you're motivated to do that.
We'll certainly cover an invitation off to the Social Care Exchange towards the end, and some of the tech that's behind what Clive was then talking about, you'll see. And in relation to kind of easy access tech, you will also see as well how, I think we're going to see later, how AI helps us get to the right menu that we're looking for more quickly, rather than searching through loads of sub menus if you're unfamiliar with the system, especially if you're new to the organization. But again, it's around how you focus that support around frontline work. When you give frontline workers the tech that keeps them at the front line, doing what they want to do, things start to happen in a real positive way. I'm going to just click through some other kind of wins, if you like, of Zone Standard. So when we say interoperable, I don't know if the interoperable Galaxy slide can magically appear from somewhere, but ultimately it's around everyone in the organization seeing all the data that they need to see to perform the role. And what that means is that you focus on where someone's real skills are. We don't create Zone Standard can work with, it doesn't have a problem. But for full interoperability, it looks at similar tasks across the whole organization and how you create specialists with the intellect that they need to be those specialists rather than generalists. And certainly in our data findings, when you start looking at different roles, it's really amazing and somewhat disappointing, I have to say, when I looked at some of the data that my own organization produced, where you see the roles that someone is employed to do, and you compare that with the tasks that they're actually doing. And it was amazing how somebody might be a fairly senior pay earner, but 70% of their time was being taken up doing manual tasks or tasks which would equate to a more grassroots level role. And fundamentally, what that says is at that moment in time, the structure of that organization is wrong. And at that moment in time, they're not making full use of the talent within the organization. And when you start to think about the roles that people are fulfilling, what that actually starts to do is it starts to drive centralization and specialists in a certain area. Your registered managers are incredibly valuable. They focus on so much and they are the center of what goes on. But it's amazing how many of them are the ones on the phone finding where someone else can fill a shift in, or on the phone to HR because they don't quite know how to deal with a certain scenario that's arisen that they need some support from HR with. And there's a whole plethora of examples that you'll all be familiar with. How actually that registered manager wants to focus on care, not some of the other bits. And when you start to fragment them out, the picture becomes so much clearer and there is a huge amount of efficiency to be had. I'm just going to give a couple of little examples around how Home from Home Care also incentivise staff. The first one was they said, if you're going to do an extra shift for us, we'll pay you within 24 hours. And that sounds great. But the real bits of magic were that all of a sudden, around the tough times that you guys have on the front line around Christmas, around the school holidays especially, and how everyone wants to take leave at the same point, actually there are also times where in their world their expenditure is much more than normal. So what they were finding was in their busy times where they used to struggle, now actually there was a load of people that say, I'm quite happy to work my day off. I really want to do this because actually I'm going on holiday next week, or I forgot to buy some presents for someone and I need some extra cash, all of that sort of stuff. What actually you can do is wrap that up into an incentive for people to work and not pay an agency. Then they also looked at other things like, what are you really good at? This person's really good at delivering meds. They're really reliable. Okay, so how do we recognize that? What we'll do is we'll give someone a 2p, 5p, whatever it may well be for every medication that they issue. Because actually the cost of them going somewhere else is more significant to us as an organization. And when you start to work on that basis, you have a scenario where if someone leaves, those organizations don't typically provide the same incentive packages that Home from Home Care do. If they leave and go to another organization and they suddenly find themselves needing to buy some extra Christmas presents, those fast pay things don't exist. And they really matter. It's a part of the package, which is in addition to salary, which is what I was kind of saying at the start of what I was saying. And their staff retention improved overnight, and it became the foundation of how you move forward without using agency. And like I said, it went to 0% for the first time 10 years ago and hasn't come off that since. When you start looking at Zone Standard and you look at a different way of doing things, actually, the system starts to pay for itself. I was doing a little bit of research. So typically, fast pay, which is what I was then talking about, will save The average organisation, let's say £1 million, around £7,500 a year. And that's assuming that you're not advertising vacancies as well. Literally because you're not having to pay agency here or there for what that cover looks like. Reducing agency cover in half, 10% typically to 5%, it's £12,500, not to be sneezed at in any respect at all. Even live payslip, which is designed to make sure that people see their pay before they get paid in live time, so that issues get identified ahead of pay and not all the hassle that goes with trying to recover that afterwards. It's another £2,000. But interoperability is where the real magic happens. So I did some research, and according to the NHS and their various toolkits are available, for £1 million organisation, if you have a truly interoperable system, you will save about 9% of your turnover more than if you've got a single login system with stitched together solutions. It's 12% if you're looking at multi-login, multi-product scenarios. And if most of your stuff is still done on paper, you're looking at about 18%. Now, when you translate that into figures, even if you've got a single login, multiple silo-based product, to save 12% is 120,000. That's 12% of your turnover. Contrast that into the budget, which we started with. Staff costs have gone up about 10% if you include the on costs. So actually, Zone Standard, in the way that it works, can support people to offset what those costs look like with a better way forward, with a better culture within the organisation, and with better quality that's likely to result in higher, more outstanding grades. Now, I'm just going to wrap up there. I can see others want to come in. I know we've got a break. There's a million things that I can go and talk about, I know, but there has to be a stop.
There has to be. A fascinating point there as well. It's not just the money that the provider saves, but how precarious I think staff's actual situation is. If the boiler breaks, you know, how many people have actually got the extra money? Or if the car breaks down, who's got the extra money there? And, you know, I think there's quite a lot of research from people like Money and Pension Service that about a quarter of all adults have left less than £100 in savings. So being able to do extra shifts, whether it's for, as you said, opportunities to take the kids out over school holidays, something for Christmas now, but really faster pay, or encouraging staff to pick up additional shifts and managing agency down through incentivising people to work, particularly when they just need extra, you know, and 1 in 6 people, I think, have no savings at all. So how do you make sure that actually people can get proper access to money when they do need it? And we should be in an empathetic and caring, supportive role as employees as well, which is great. I just want to pick up a couple of things in the chat before we sort of segue into our next section. Please do jump off and get a natural break, anybody who's on the call with us as well. But just wanted to come back to Matt had written at the beginning of the chat. Really, the blockers are a lack of systems thinking and business and analysis skills across their organisation, which I thought was really powerful, and also picked up the intuitive systems, the UX experience. Facebook, yes, was made by teenagers that put gamification and narcissistic nudge theory into process. We're not advocating that, I don't think, with Litties and autism services. But Anthony and I do think, you know, I'm sure Clive, you do, that intuitively texturizing the sort of interaction of the tech is really important, because, you know, we certainly know staff can pick up their phone and they can get on the TikTok with their children or, you know, grandchildren, but then doing something as simple as just updating the care record because you've got to go through multi-factor authentication, which we know is a problem with people that might also be neurodivergent within the workforce and the individual supported. So we don't like those kind of complex systems. We could barely get into Teams, some of us today. So, and we've got passwords and things like that. So keep it simple, how to make it accessible. I'm sure Anthony might touch on the app and how interactive it is with Zone Standard as we come back. A couple of other points as well. I think Clive's been chatting back and forth to Ben, but also that I think there's some interesting things about how you drive quality. Data enriches the quality experience both for the person at the centre of care and the workforce itself. So really great. Just going to jump over to Emma to see if she's got a bit of a reflection. Oh yes, and Clive, I'll come back to you as well in a sec.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, I think I noticed actually that Clive's last comment was around the culture, which is something that I feel really strongly about, and we were talking quite a lot about this in the prep coming up to this, and that it's not just the change in the digital, but actually that whole culture piece needs significant time and investment to ensure that staff feel valued. And that example that Anthony just said about paying staff within 24 hours, and that actually makes the staff feel valued and sort of recognized as well. So there's that whole piece around the culture that really needs investing in, as well as the digital. And I think the other bit that's not talked about yet, which I think we'll probably talk a bit more about later on as well, is around the sort of reporting and that ability to be able to get the reports off that you need at the point of needing them simply and easily. And that was one of the things that came out in the digital research, was around it was so complicated to get those reports that you needed when you needed them, and you'd have to get bespoke reports built and all of this complicated stuff that then impacts on people's opinions and attitudes to the system. So when I went to see Zone Standard, the culture was the thing that really hit home to me. It was about the system was a tool that was enabling people to do their jobs, and that was something that came through really strongly. Yeah, that was and the other piece actually, just before I hand over to Clive, was around the user access as well, which is not done very well with other systems, or at all actually, in a lot of systems that I've seen, and actually making sure that that is accessible to individuals where possible. It's goals focused and all the rest of it, so that they are taking ownership of their care, as well as sort of staff being able to access the system to be able to deliver quality care as well.
Yeah, really great thoughts and reflections, and we can certainly make things easier and smoother, can't we, across all of those different boundaries, as you say, Emma, the different systems. Clive?
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Just to follow on from what Emma was saying, particularly about reporting. Another thing I saw there, this was actually at the Social Care Exchange. So this is the building where all the data is coming in for processing. It's very, very high tech. One of the staff members that was showing me the tech was a bit stuck really as to decide what to show me, because they got so much to choose from. But they showed me, just said, oh, maybe this, and showed a graph which showed, not a graph, a bar chart that showed the age and gender profile of all the supported people in the organization. And I thought, okay, I imagine probably a lot of providers probably don't have that to hand in quite the same way. And they said, oh, no, we haven't finished yet. And then they overlaid the same bar chart for their own staff, and it matched perfectly. So what they could show was that the staff that they'd employed are matched to the people that they work with. And that was just so powerful. And I think probably is going to be really powerful, and part of the reasons why the organization has so many outstanding ratings. But it was the pride that the person had of showing me that data that was speaking to the point about both reporting and about the culture that Emma mentioned. So there's so much data that the system produces, but it's not overwhelming you with that. It's just there if you need it.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think that's really helpful. I'm going to segue you back. Just picking up a point here about the duplicate entries from Ben, and I think that's a great description. Multiple demands of systems, digestive systems, just a beautiful analogy, but we all have this, don't we? where the local authority wants the PAMS reporting, you've got CQC reporting, you've got contract management. It's just the data within the data within the data, and how accessible it is in many different ways. I'm going to let Ben jump in, and then Anthony will go into our second demo. Excuse me, Ben.
Thanks. No, just to sort of pick up on that one, I was involved in two projects. One was the minimum operational data set for care providers, and one was the foundational spec for case management systems in local authorities. And in both cases, we were being asked to contribute to consistent data standards that could replicate across the systems, could talk to each other, and crucially could talk to both the care provider system, the NHS system, the local authority system, and all the others. That was done, I'm going to say, with the best will in the world and with the best effort we could make on it. But at the time, there was no way of enforcing it. And now, through the Data Use and Access Act, of course, there's provision for the Secretary of State to mandate data standards. And I think, you've got the most incredible evidence base here of what could happen if the right data is being captured as effortlessly as possible, and then shared around the systems that need to access it. And if we could help the DHSC to understand the value of the powers they've now been given under the Data Use and Access Act, I think it might make a lot of people's lives a lot simpler. But I think there needs to be some energy given to it, not from the government side, but from the perspective of real people.
Oh, we 100% agree. Clive, yeah.
Yeah, Ben, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's one of the most powerful things about this system is it was developed by a provider and developed by the sector, and not necessarily originally intended for other organizations, but it's very clear that it has the potential to be helpful in other organizations. Also, absolutely agree with you about this somewhat at times odd relationship we have with data at the moment. It is a strange one, but it's also, I think there's real value in data. It's become, really the thing of value, hasn't it, in Western societies at least. So that's a big conversation to have at some point.
Thanks, Clive.
There's more. Yeah, there's more in there in the report, and Liz will drop the link as well into the chat. But I think we do need to push for, or ARC certainly should be advocating for, what is a minimum data set. We know that through the Fair Cost of Care, learning disability and autism services were left off the list. There is a bit of supported living understood, but it's a really good opportunity to push from a policy perspective as well. As the Fair Pay Agreement's got a huge amount around workforce coming up at us, so we need to be better and stronger at articulating what specialist services, what our members are doing, and what systems information could be gleaned. Great stuff there. Anthony, back to you.
Thank you. I'll just give the team back in Lincoln a nudge that I'll come to you in a moment, so they can make sure that they're ready and their cameras are on. So in the first session, we spoke very much around, not as much as we'd have liked to, it's a massive topic, love to continue at some point, but just around how we make sure that we support our staff team, both in terms of tech, in terms of retention, how we keep those costly agencies to an absolute minimum. It's not just about keeping your staff team that Zone Standard is really, really good at. It's also about how its design philosophy will maximize, or at least help you to maximize, the efficiency of that resource. So the first part's very much about keeping the resource. The second part now is very much around the efficiency of the resource. And really there's two areas. One is how interoperability leads to centralization, centralized resources and what you can do with that, and how data helps to unlock a culture of visibility, transparency, and stakeholder input. And some of that's been discussed in the last few minutes. So I just want to take a moment to welcome Becky. Becky works with Home from Home Care, and she will introduce herself far more better than I can and talk a little bit around her user perspective of what happens when you start to centralize and look at things on an interoperable level. So Becky, over to you.
Hello, I'm Becky. So I'm the resource manager in Home from Home Care. We currently have a team of 6 people within our team that manage all of the homes, deploying their staff teams and all of the covering. That's the residential homes, supported living homes as well. So one of the things that we do is we manage all of the rotas globally. So any absences or anything that we get through, that's responsibility of our team to work with the home managers to make sure that all the homes remain covered at all times. And so we look at that across the whole organisation at any one time. So we've got the ability to see who's where all the time. So we're not, if there's an absence on the day, we're not relying on colleagues to come in from home. We can instantly get that cover to make sure there's no delay. So we're looking at not only numbers in the homes, but the homes attributes as well. So we've got some quite complex individuals. The system helps us in identifying if there's any risks with those attributes. So we're looking at things like oxygen training, medication training. On the day, if we had an absence of any of those, that would have quite a significant impact on the home. Our team's responsibility is to get that in place as soon as we can, which zone standard helps identify where those colleagues are so we can move them in instantly to reduce the risk to the home. So that takes a lot of the pressure away from the home managers in needing to cover those absences themselves. And it also means that we don't use any agency. So it's all covered within our own staff teams. We also support the managers in writing their rotas. So it reduces that colleague whisper in the manager's ears, oh, can you give me Friday afternoon off? That's something that's managed completely away from the home. So we can take that away from the managers. So we meet with them all weekly. So the registered manager, they're still in control of their rota, but they've got somebody on the outside just making sure that the individual's care hours are met and that the staff team have got all fair rotas, especially at the minute. We've had a lot more communication coming to the Christmas period. So we've got people going home where the staffing needs to be slightly different. We can take that away from the managers and get all of that written for them. We also look at staff morale. If we're having any issues in any homes, we can actually move colleagues to another home. So if we're looking at progression for colleagues, actually we can help with that. There's different roles available in all of our different homes. And so we can help the managers in keeping their staff team progressed and their development as well. We can also be strategic in how we cover the homes, so we can advertise shifts out so everyone can see this on their app. So all the homes can have shifts advertised. The managers can pick and choose actually which ones do we need to focus on most. Say they've got an activity or something going ahead, we can advertise that one. The colleague can pick that up through their app, and then they can choose to have that as a rapid payment. So that's paid within 24 hours, which is really handy coming up to Christmas for us as well. So we see an increase in people requesting those rapid payments. I think the main thing for us is making sure that the managers know what's going on with their rotas, so we can work with them to make sure that they're happy, but at the same time we can see the risks everywhere all the time. And so if we know that we need to deploy to a certain home because maybe they've had higher absence levels over another, we can actually get that in place for them without the managers needing to worry about the fact that they need to do that themselves. It means that actually we only need us as 6, a team of 6 are able to manage that between us whilst using zone standard to help identify the risks in the homes, rather than all the managers spending quite significant time on their homes rotas themselves. Don't know, has anyone got any questions? Anything else you want me to go through?
I think that's really useful, Becky. I don't have sight of the chat, so I'll just let Clive just tell me whether or not there's any questions coming in, or whether we're going to move on.
I think we'll carry on. I can't see anything in the chat.
Okay, excellent. Becky, thank you. I know that it can be certainly for me. I find it really nervous in talking to people. But when you were then just talking about some of the benefits that you've got available to you, I kind of half thought in my head, you are talking so positively that there's a real sense of how great this system is. And for people listening who aren't too familiar with what Zone Standard looks at the moment, I can only say, please make an appointment with us to come and have a look behind the scenes at the Social Care Exchange if you are interested in seeing what a Zone Standard could look, Zone Standard system can look like, because we're only touching the surface of the difference that it makes to frontline people, specialists that are focused in their resourcing, or how we alleviate some of the non-specialist pressures that impact on registered managers. All of this is about how everything comes together as one, and that is the key to the interoperability. Thank you, Becky. I know that we've covered it a little bit already. There's a huge importance that frontline tech works, because without it, none of the stuff behind it does, and what you've potentially bought for its advantages don't materialize. Carers don't want to be typing up notes in an office. They want to be delivering care. And Clive spoke about the organisation, and the use of the app earlier. Frontline workers want support from tech, support that helps them deliver better care. They don't want awkward systems that they're scared by or confused by. And that's why I'm also just going to bring in the other guys from Actualise Living in Lincoln, who are going to do a little bit of a demo around the app, what that app looks like. You've heard reference to it already. And Dave will cover a couple of the features that are going to make them a hit, or makes the app a hit with frontline staff. Things around frontline care plan visibility, event recording, the extra shift availability that Becky spoke about, and the most important thing for workers other than pay is how they book their leave. So over to you, Dave.
Okay, so just one caveat, I will be showing this app in a test environment. So most things are there. The bit around shift availability, I'm not going to be able to show that on the screen. You just need to take my word for it. You'll see it come up, but there'll be no shifts in there because there are no shifts available in test at the moment. So what I'll be showing you is the app that all of our frontline support workers use. They have this app both on their devices for work. We've actually provided all of our support staff with a phone, which has this app on it, but they can also use this app on their personal device. And on their personal device, it's limited to just being able to be used for their kind of self-service annual leave, viewing the rota and things like that. So what I'm going to show you is really quickly how someone can submit a diary, how they can view a care plan, and how to submit annual leave. So if I just get this window up. So I'm hoping everyone can see that there. So I'm not very good at managing my actions when I'm in the test environment. You can see there immediately that I have 114 shift confirmations for shifts that I've fictitiously been in attendance of. What we can see here are the 3 individuals that I work with most often, any actions that I need to complete as a support worker, my schedule, and any important news that the company wants me to view. If I wanted to really quickly submit a diary for Connor, I would just select him. I would hit create, straight into an activity, and it'll bring me through to the diary entry. And what you're going to see is that as a support worker, there's pretty much very minimal that I need to do. So I'm just going to put some fake times in there. Choose the activity, arts and crafts. If I wanted to quickly review what the care plan says about arts and crafts, I select here, and that will bring out a little menu, and I can see what it says in the care plan, just as a reminder of what to do. If the entire activity was declined, decline it, it goes away. If I want to add any additional notes, I can type in this box here. All the diaries that have been configured in the background to be so don't require this overview to be complete, but that's controllable by the management in the home. So if you needed more information about a particular activity, you can turn that field on to be required. But for this demo, I'm not going to fill that in. Next, recording things around mood. So if everything's all good, there's nothing else to do. As an extra question, just to ask were any anxious behaviours displayed at all. So what we're doing is we're collecting information about behaviours which were observed, but ultimately kind of dealt with at the point, didn't turn into an incident of any kind. So we're still collecting that data. For here, I can say no. Method of choice, independent choice, level of support, full support. Any other people there with me, any other individuals with them. If I wanted to flag it, something of concern happened, I can tick that box, and I can add any photos or attachments that support the diary that I'm completing. Once I've done that, that diary is done. So what I'm trying to show you there is how quickly someone can go through and submit that diary Aside from that, I can go through here. There's lots of actual things I can do here, like tasks, SMART reports, things like that. I'm just going to show the care plan. Go through to the care plan. There it is. Click on the section, and I'm in someone's care plan viewing that. It lets me know the last time I read it. If there was an update to this care plan, that box would be pink instead. And it's going to ask me to basically give a digital signature to say that I've read and understood this care plan. If there was an update to this care plan, there'll be an action for me on my homepage to go straight to that section and read and understand it. As well as all the care side, all staff have the ability to manage their kind of like day-to-day self-service things. So if I go through to my profile here, under under personal, I've got my annual leave. So I can submit my annual leave request. I'll just do a quick fake one here. It shows you what my leave entitlement is. I haven't taken any leave yet this year in test, but I'm going to take 32 hours, 4 days off. Take an approver. And that's me booking my leave. It will give me an estimate of how much I'm going to have left at the bottom. So if I take this 32 hours, I'm going to have 208 hours left. That then goes straight through to someone like Becky. Becky will then look at the rota, see if it's appropriate for me to take that leave. It'll go to my manager as well to sign off, and then my leave is booked. That was a really, really quick demo of that, of the Alpha support stuff, but we're out of time. So that is a very tiny amount of what the app can do. If there's any questions, please ask, but otherwise I'll let Anthony carry on.
Thanks, Dave. Whistle stop indeed, but very informative. And you know, to add the visuals to what we've talked about for the last hour, I know is really important to help people conceptualize. But as you would have seen there, incredibly easy to use, everything in one place. I know that, I think that Luke's going to talk a little bit in a moment around how some of the AI they're developing even supports that to an even greater process. So on that note, I might as well hand over, I assume, to Luke to talk about some of the developments that they're working at. And the important thing that I'll raise at this point is that we listen to our users all the time. So tech we're aware of in the tech world, but it's about how we apply it to frontline sector requirements. And that's a big part that puts us ahead of other people that will just work out whether it's worthwhile doing something or not on a profit sheet. So back to you guys in Lincoln.
I think really quickly, Anthony, do you want me to cover off the Scribe element first, and then Luke's?
If you could, that'd be amazing, because Scribe is already here. It arrived very recently. So just while Dave's getting that Scribe ready, this again is around how we make life easier at the front line, but for everyone in an organization. So this is something that's relevant across the breadth of the organization.
So again, I haven't got much time to show this, so I prepared something very simple to demonstrate it. But Zone Scribe is an ambient AI, so it's recording conversations or assessments or interactions that you're having. You can use it to complete diaries in the future in Zone Standard and things like that. The demo that I prepared is just a really simple assessment that took place and the documentation that's going to be then completed off the back of that. So if I just, again, share my screen. So again, there's lots of stuff to go over in Zone Scribe, but what I prepared is a really simple thing. So I've got a transcription here. This was an assessment that took place between a support worker and a parent. So it is all transcribed, everything done for AI. It's done a very good job of that. What I can do in Zone Scribe is I can create templates for any documentation that I'd like to create from that. And what I did was I created a very simple support plan template, which we're going to create off the back of this assessment. But those templates can cover anything. We've used them for meeting minutes, like other scribes. We've also used them for policy and things like that. So off the back of this recording, I'm going to simply create a document. I'm going to choose support plan. Hit create, and off the back of that transcription, it's going to just go through and complete this for me. Now, what we have also done is we built integrations of this with any online system. Ideally, it's going to be used with Zone Standard and it's going to be built into Zone Standard, but any online system will work for an extension. You'll be able to complete forms online as well. So now that this is completed, I can show you something else. all of these green boxes and yellow boxes are what the AI model has completed. If it is green, it is very confident that it's got that information correct. But if it is yellow, it means that the information is ambiguous or uncertain. And if it was red, it's not going to complete it because it doesn't know. So, for example, date of birth was never mentioned, so that's gone to red. Parent name not specified. If I go down, I think it'll actually do. So if I go to here, it will tell me why it has done that. So the rationale is that the primary contact implied to be a parent speaking in context, but the actual name was not provided. So it's provided something and giving the reason why it's not giving you a fully confident answer. Once this has been completed, it can be exported into an email, into a document, any CRM or kind of solution that you're using kind of some kind of like an extension in your browser to complete that. So again, that's a really, really short demonstration of Zone Scribe. There's so much more to it, but hopefully that gives you a flavour of what it can do.
And I think, thanks, Dave. I think the really important thing there is it kind of acts as a bit of a catch-all. So the fact that it allows you to look at that data and highlight where it hasn't got something, I would assume, Dave, it has a big impact in organisations who are often finding that people don't fully complete a form, miss certain details, which can be really quite relevant, that take forever to kind of find.
Yeah, we found it really useful for completing assessments. Even though that wasn't the full one, but our assessments are really in depth, and our team will go out, record the entire assessment, and then through Zone Standard, that care plan is kind of built with this tool. Any gaps it's not going to complete, and also the consistency in how it is input into the system. It will all read the same, and the language is correct, and spelling and grammar is correct, and things like that.
It really is a massive step forwards, and the fact that organisations can again have something on the front line. I know it's across the organisation, it's as relevant in the board meeting as it is in a care setting, but the fact that they've got something now that just captures the information and supports them in their role, making sure that it's about delivering care at the front line, not tucked away in an office, furiously typing up notes from yesterday or the day before, is a massive bonus. And I know at the start, one of the big pieces of feedback that came back that I wrote down was very much around the concern from frontline users is that the tech that they use restricts them on the front line and restricts them from the front line. And this is how Zone Standard is changing all of that. If I can quickly go back to Lincoln, for you guys just to continue what you're working and developing on, what's new, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Luke, I'm one of the developers at Actualize Living. I'm just going to go through a couple of features that are currently in development that we are currently working on and hope to be in place in early 2026. So if I share my screen. Okay, so the first feature I'm going to go through, name to be confirmed, but I'm just going to go over Intelligent Insights for now. But essentially, this is a way of using natural language to produce reports, to produce data, to give it in a format that's easy to consume, that can be very bespoke to not only the sort of individuals that we're supporting, but also to the user who's consuming that report. People like to consume different data in different ways. So this is a really easy way for someone to use natural language to produce the reports that have the information that they need to fulfill their role. So as I said, they can be highly personalized. So you can have very bespoke reports to certain individuals that may have certain needs. And you can adapt them, refine them whenever you want without having to wait for a data team or whatever to provide that information to you. So I will just flick over. So quick demo. Again, this is in development, so I won't show too much. However, so you can provide a query and submit and just on the fly, just get a chart produced like that. From natural language into a chart, and it will show you the underlying data as well that sits behind that. The next step to this sort of feature that we're working on is then to take that information and apply it so they can create, so a user can create a dashboard of a report that they can then store and then come back to and reuse whenever they need to consume that data. So there is a dashboard builder. And using natural language, you can ask the tool to create an entire dashboard from one prompt. So I've just copied and pasted an example into here earlier, create an activity monitor dashboard for Laura Denton Smith, who's one of our test service users. This should focus on moods presented during varying activity types and also activities that are completed over time. I can click generate, That's going to go away, and then using AI, controlled AI, so it's AI that's hosted within our own infrastructure. So it's not using this data to train any models, anything like that. It'll go away because it's building a whole report. It says it can take up to 30 to 60 seconds because obviously it's interrogating all the data, it's finding the queries that it wants to generate that report, and then it will go away and generate a report as an example. So here's one I made earlier. And once you've got a dashboard, obviously you can have a dashboard, whatever you wanted a dashboard for. You have the ability, if you want to tweak what it's generated for you, you can edit with AI, so you can further prompt that report to show it in a different format or to restrict the timeframes of the data that you're showing, whatever it might be, again, all using natural language. Once you've got a report that you're happy with, you then have the ability to publish a report for other people to consume, which would look like that, which doesn't have the sort of editing elements on it, but then it can be published and embedded in the system that allows other people to consume that data. Any questions about that before I move on to the next project that we are working on?
Luke, could I just add in a question? I know people will be thinking of it. You've obviously done a very focused frontline care example there, but with interoperability in the way that Zoom Standard is truly interoperable, that could pull data from across huge numbers of data points. So it might well be which staff members interact with this person the most. It could be an HR type of question. It would go across the Zoom Standard platform.
Yeah, so it's got access to multiple data sets from all breadths of the organization. We've enginized it in a way where that can be controlled. So you've got guardrails there. So there'll be certain data sets that this tool has access to, but then depending on who you are as a user, we can control those permissions. So you as a user will only have access to the information that you should have access to. So when you're using AI to build these reports, you're never going to get sight of something you shouldn't get sight of. For example, there might be some payroll information in the system. You don't want any person being able to go, oh, show me how much everyone gets paid, for example. So that can all be controlled. But yes, you do have access to all the data within the system when using this tool.
People talked earlier, Luke, about kind of some of the troubles of getting data and relevant data and sorting through that data and all of those sorts of things. Anyone that was thinking that has seriously just seen how it needs to be done in the future. So that's an excellent visual. Thank you, Luke.
No worries. So I haven't got a demonstration of the next slide, but I will talk to it and what we're developing. So we are developing and integrating something into the Zoom Standard platform called Ask Al, named from Actualized Living, which is essentially an AI-powered assistant that you'll be able to utilize to retrieve information from the system. So quite often you need combined data sets, again, similar to the report builder, whereas that's producing charts, but actually you might want to go out on an activity with a particular individual, but actually what does their care plan say? Do they have a risk assessment for that? So it will be able to look across the system for those data sources and bring that information right to you really efficiently and really quickly. Another sort of function that we plan to use it for is the ability to navigate the system with ease. So a system like Zoom Standard obviously has a lot of features in it, and therefore can have quite overwhelming menus sometimes if you're somebody that has a lot of permissions and a lot of access to certain stuff. So finding that stuff can be troublesome maybe. So the idea behind this is just through natural language, you can navigate the system. Okay, I want to go and see Laura's diary entries, and it will just take you to Laura's diary entries automatically without having to click through all the different menus to get to where you want to be. And then the final point of Ask Al, it will be used using AI agents to be able to actually record data. So interactions an individual might have, recording activities and stuff, just the ability that the AI knows the form that needs to be completed, it knows the fields that it needs to complete, and therefore using natural language, it can guide you through completing that form automatically. So again, that's hopefully something that's coming in early 2026, Ask Al.
And again, you know, that's another development to support frontline workers. I mentioned it earlier. If you're new into an organization, you know, it takes you a while, not necessarily to understand the written rule book, but the unwritten rule book sometimes, and where you find different forms and how you go around different things. this makes you far more feel at home. And if we take you all the way back to staff retention, big thing we were talking about at the start around reducing agency use, it's things like this that make the difference. And I can't think of anyone. I mean, I know how hard the guys work in Lincoln. It's like tomorrow's world with all the concepts and the ideas that flick across. I don't know of any other providers that are bringing this sort of thing so rapidly to the market and consistently. There's always a development that's underway. Guys in Lincoln, I can see a hand up. Let me come back to you.
It was just a question in the chat just to cover off. So one of the ideas around this was that the information can be presented to you in as most accessible way as possible, including multiple languages.
Right.
I.e., if English isn't your first language, you can have the information presented to you in your first language.
The AI that we use under the hood does support multiple dialects. So as long as it's a supported dialect, it will have that functionality to be able to talk in one language and then for that to sort of translate and then record in English.
Absolutely fantastic. You know, to be able to have frontline workers be able to link in with an app in their native tongue and have that translate accurately into English. It's fantastic, really is. I can see Emma's asked a question online around offline capability
Yes.
for the guys in Lincoln. I know that's an answer I don't necessarily know. So is that okay for you guys just to pick that up quickly?
So we have worked with a client that required offline mode. Obviously, Zone Standard is massive, and to have the entirety of Zone Standard offline at all times is not necessarily the most realistic thing. However, for frontline support staff to be able to get to the diary, see the rota, see the mark sheet, things like that, we have completed that with other partners. But yeah, it certainly wouldn't be the entirety of Zone Standard offline at all times. It's just too big.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, any other questions that have arisen or that I haven't spotted in the chat?
I don't think so. I've been keeping an eye on the
Good.
I was going to
So
go
the
back to
guys-
Clive for some further reflections, if he had any, and then hopefully bring us up to winding up time.
Thanks, Victoria. And yeah, I just think it's the system when I saw it last in Lincoln was, I said earlier on, mind blown. It's just incredible how this thing works. I think probably the best way to think about it is if you go into a service and you see multiple systems, some of them quite modern and do lots of things, others built by somebody who left the organization 20 years ago and hasn't been developed since, and everything in between, multiple logins and everything. And if you just said, well, how would you fix this? I mean, what would be the best way to fix this? You'd probably say, could I have a blank sheet of paper, please? And actually that's what this is. So if you think of it in those terms, it's almost as if you've got a magic wand and you can just fix all of the problems. I know that sounds a bit over the top, but I think it genuinely is now, because once you've bolted on AI onto this incredible system, then you've got unbelievable possibilities, and they all move towards the things we've talked about, making things easy for people, making the interface work for people, getting the system really out of the way so that people can do the job. So I just think it is amazing. And I guess probably the final thing is if anybody wants to talk further about it, let Anthony and me know, and we can give you a demo, and we can probably, I haven't checked this with Anthony, so I hope he's going to continue nodding, but I think we could probably make that demo bespoke to your organization. So if you were to tell us what kinds of things in your organization aren't working particularly well, we could tailor the demo to make sure it speaks to those points.
We'd certainly be interested in a pre-demo conversation just to understand what some of those pain points are and some of those frustrations. You may not have the solutions, but we might already have them, and we can sort of support the demo of what we've got and how we can overcome those together.
And anybody can contact Liz and myself, and we'll connect them directly with you as well. That's been fascinating. Thank you very much. This has been a really interesting opportunity for us to look at what data and evidence showed us across the membership. As people will recall, we talked to 80 individual organisations and found out lots of things that were working inconsistently and not very smoothly in different places and in different service models within learning disability and autism. But as always, some pockets of really brilliant stuff going on. as we've shared with you, one of those such examples within Zone Standard today. ARC is still fascinated by digital. This is not our one-stop discussion today. We hope to launch with members in the new year a special interest group, which is about supporting all members and non-members. So if software suppliers or other people are interested, we want to talk about how we can really take technology on a journey within learning disability and autism services, enhancing quality, thinking about the people and the processes as we've touched on today. So cultures, sharing insights and experiences. It's one of the things we do really well is peer-to-peer exchange within ARC England with other members. And also to think about funding opportunities, because the big thing that we haven't ripped the plaster off is how much all of this costs. And we're pretty certain that every organisation on the call with us today and every member is spending, tens of thousands of pounds on the digital systems and the staff training and the content creation that they need across their organisation. And they're either spending it in big chunks or continuously through lots of revolving contracts with software suppliers as well. So we want to help navigate that with you and keep you informed of opportunities to tender for chunks of money if it can help digital transformation in your locality, and how we're going to be able to look at other opportunities, because, as I said at the top, from a policy context, if digital transformation is something that's on the NHS agenda, and we think that there is an opportunity to work closely at a grassroots and community level, then we really should be supporting members to lead pilots or evaluations of emerging technologies and look at resource and tools that we can share with you so you can be better informed to make purchasing decisions, to connect with experts around the table, as we've got from our colleague Emma. Claire obviously does a lot in our training and resource function within ARC England directly. Liz is becoming a tech expert. She starts to know all sorts of things about CRM systems. And then, of course, Anthony, Clive and our colleagues from Actualised Living and other members really talking about the service configuration, the operation and the front end of systems. So we're fascinated back end, front end, and we're really interested in AI. We're not going to be playing with Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook or anything like that in the sessions, but it should be a flow of knowledge exchange. That's coming up mid-February, so we'll make sure that colleagues that have joined us today and all the people that registered for this session are invited to those special interest groups. They drop in and we'll hold them quarterly through 2026. Liz, I think we'll be sharing the presentation and also the recording and the report from today for everybody through the ARC England website, and we'll pop up details for you to get in touch to arrange a facilitated conversation with us. Ben, we can already see a few emails flying back and forth, so we'll get that meeting set up as well. And if we don't see you before, we hope you have a wonderful Christmas. I can't believe we're at that point already in December and thinking about it. So we shall take care and see you all in the new year. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. Thanks.